Hi, do you know this game? This is Tycoon India 1981, and it is the heaviest game that I've ever played out of India. Now, luckily for me, I've been able to play this game for the last few weeks. This is coming to Kickstarter and should be launching any minute now. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how to play, tell you what my thoughts are, but I'm also going to tell you what this game means to me and what I think it means for the industry as a whole. Welcome to Tycoon India 1981. Now, first and foremost, this is a prototype. I have talked to the designer and he told me that the games that will be published through the campaign will not use the same manufacturer, so nothing here is finalized. Not the art, not the components, nothing. He said most of this has been dialed down. There may be a few tweaks here and there to the math as well as to the components, but just keep that in mind as we watch this video. Now, I've taught this game quite a few times, and the first important thing that I'm going to mention is how to score the game. Just because I want you to keep that in mind as I give you a nice little brief tutorial, and that'll help you give an idea, a better feel, I think, of how to win the game. Now, there are two values or tracks that you need to keep in mind. First is this track here. This is the influence track. And your little pieces here are going to gain influence through a number of ways in the game, and you're going to slowly move up around the board. At the end of the game, you're going to see who has the most influence, and that's one measure, one metric that you got to keep in touch with. The second one is what's called the asset value. And if you notice on these cards here, you'll see asset value there, and you need to add up all of that. Now, there are lots of different ways to get asset value. There's ways to get up on these tracks. There's cards from here. There's many different ways, but the main way are these industry cards here that I previously showed you. You're going to take your asset value and add it all up at the end of the game. Now, at the end of the game, you're going to see who has the most influence. And then you can see who has the most assets. And if that's the same player, that player wins the game. But out of all the games I've played, that's only happened once. Only once. Most of the time, you'll go to the tiebreaker. So if whoever had the highest influence and whoever had the highest assets, are they different players, then you're going to go to this tiebreaker with these tokens. And there are many ways to get this, but that will determine who the real winner of the game is. If for some reason you have the same favor amount, then you share the victory. I have never seen that happen. Usually one person clearly has more than the others. Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and get you caught up on how to play this game. Tycoon India is a game that's played over 7 rounds, and each round is divided into 4 phases. We're going to skip the first phase and go straight to the second phase. Second phase is always going to change throughout the course of the game. So as you see here on 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7 rounds, those rounds will have a policy bid. And then on rounds 3 and 6, you're going to get revenue as well as do national projects. And we'll go into that in just a little bit. Now, phase 2 is probably going to be the trickiest part of the game because it's the most inconsistent. Now, most of the time, you're going to be bidding on these policy cards in the game. And you're going to be bidding on them with these little tokens here. These are what's called promoters. Think of them as lobbyists to try and sway certain politicians so that way you, as these industry tycoon, can get these laws enacted that will be more beneficial for you. Now, what do these policy cards do? Well, they're going to give you resources in the game. They might give you more politicians, more lobbyists. They might give you more influence as well. They might give you an end game bonus that's unique to you, or they might give you like a passive benefit, which will be like this unique player ability that you have throughout the course of the game. In addition to that, you'll see this green text here. This is actually flavor text, which describes what this particular act is and how it actually impacted India. Also, that these cards you notice here are worth favor points, so you could help win that tiebreaker at the end of the game. Now, if you're not doing policy cards, you could also be getting income. Now, if you notice on these industry cards here that I showed you earlier, you'll see here that says revenue. So if you own these and you built these 3 cards, then you'll gain $50, $40, $25. And you also have to pay out shares. That's right, shares. Sometimes your opponents can't invest in your company and they might buy a share from you. This share, let's say if I was the right company and an opponent had this, I would have to pay them $10 for each share that they had. So either you're going to be bidding on policy cards, you're going to get income, get more money, and then give out money to other people, or you're going to be doing this. And this is what are called national projects. And you only do this on rounds 3 and round 6, and in which case you're going to be taking influencers. I'm sorry, influencers. You're going to be taking these promoters or lobbyists as well as money, and that's going to give you influence and favor tokens at the end. And if I say flavor, please forgive me. But this is a way to train most of your resources out to get more influence points. And this can have a big impact in the game. Now, phase 3 is probably the most important phase of the game, and that's because this is pretty much the whole game, or these industry cards. You want to get as many industry cards as you can in the game. Now, you're going to be bidding for these, and you're going to be bidding for these with money. And you're going to use this industry bidding track here. And then you only have 2 rounds of bidding. So one person might bid 35, and then you'll have to bid more than that, at least 5 more than that. And then you'll go here, someone might bid here, and then you'll have only 2 rounds to bid. And once that is done, only the top 2 players will win industry cards, and the other 2 players will not win those industry cards. Instead, they'll get some more politicians here on the next part of the board. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that each round, one player is going to be the Tycoon. Tycoon is going to have several little benefits in the game. One of them is that during the policy bid, if whoever bids the most, they're going to give their lobbyists or the promoters to the Tycoon. Everyone else, if you lose the bid, you're going to take your bid and then place it here on this strategy action space. So maybe green bid 3 and they're going to put the 3 there. Maybe red bid 3 and they lost and they're going to put it there. In addition to that, when you're bidding for industry cards, if you lose that bid and you don't get an industry card, well, then you're going to take 3 promoters and they're going to add it here to your little strategy segment. So even if you lose the bid, you're still gaining something. Now, while I did say that phase 3 was the most important part because you're bidding over these industry cards here, I do think the meat of the game is here in phase 4, where you're going to be taking actions. Now, each player is going to have 2 little action tokens here, and then on their turn, it's going to go clockwise around the board. They're going to take one of these 6 actions here, and they're going to place it here. Now, their second action has to be different than the first. So maybe they take a politics and a strategy. Maybe they take a strategy and then a loan. Maybe they take a loan and then a build action. In addition to that, the Tycoon has the added benefit of getting 1 free action. So everyone else has 2, but the Tycoon has 3. Now, the stipulation is that they have to take all 3 actions have to be different. So the loan, strategy, or build, or maybe build, muster, and then strategy. Now, it's like a quick little brief overview of the 6 actions here. First is the build action. The build action is probably the most important action. In the game, you're going to have anywhere from 14 to 21 actions, and a third of those are going to be the build action. And the build action is when you get that industry card, you can take your little house and you can put it on this card. And then you're going to build that house by taking it and then placing it on the map somewhere. There's going to be a cost associated with that, and that's labeled down here. And that's associated to the tracks. There will be 6 of them. And you have to pay money to the boss of that tract. If you are the boss of that tract, then you don't have to pay any money at all. Now, you definitely want to have to keep that in mind, and building these is going to be really, really important because these industry cards are the main source of the game, the main mechanic of the game. And because these industry cards are so important, that makes the loan action also important. Now, the loan action is going to give you money, and at the end of the game, you're going to have to pay that money back. But like almost every game that I played, like someone is always taking out a loan. Most players take out loans. I haven't seen it to where a player has not, because the game can be really, really tight, at least for all of us, because we're kind of new to the game. The next action I want to talk about is the politics action. Now, the politics action is going to activate all your policy cards that you own. So if you look here in the top right-hand corner, you'll see 2 influence, 2 promoters, and $10. So if I go here, I'm going to activate all of those, and I'm going to get all of those. In addition to that, I'm also going to get 1 favor token for my trouble. The next action I want to talk about is this share action. And the share action allows you to buy shares from your opponents. If you see here, this share here, that's $55. And every time you buy a share, you're going to get influence. And in addition to that, at the end of the game, you're going to look at all your assets. And whoever has the most assets, well, their shares are going to be worth 60 points. And then the second most will be 40 points, 20, and then 10. So by investing in other people's companies, it assures you to get more asset value. The muster action is also pretty self-explanatory. You're going to get a card here that's a little merit card. In addition to that, you're going to add up to 6 little promoters or lobbyists and then add them to this strategy pool here. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, that's because you're going to take the strategy action. And the strategy action is really, really important. I can't stress that enough. Now, when you take a strategy action, your currency is going to be the lobbyists or the promoters that you have in your strategy pool here. And you can use them for lots of different things. You can get an extra action, so maybe on a future turn you can have 3 actions instead of 2. You can also go here and you can just buy an industry card right outright. So if you lose an auction, you just buy one at double the price. In addition to getting more actions and getting industry cards, you can also use your promoters as well as your own shares to take these actions. And you put your share on it so that no one else can take it for the rest of the game. So maybe you want to go up here and then get money. Maybe you want to go here and then put a house onto the map. Maybe you want to go here and get a policy card. Maybe just go here and just get influence points right outright. Or maybe you go here and move up one of the tracks, at least one space, or you go here and go up 2 spaces on the tracks. Now we're going to go back to the beginning of the next round, and that'll be phase 1. Now we skipped this earlier because I think it wasn't as important and you wouldn't get it then. The new Tycoon player, and that's going to be the player who won the industry bid earlier, they're going to take the pawn and put it in one of the different 3 cardinal directions. So you have northwest, east, south, and that's because your map here is also divided in those 4 sections. You have west, east, north, and south. So you're going to place this pawn somewhere. Let's say you place it here south. And if you notice, the bonus here is favor 1. Then all the houses in that area are going to receive that reward. So here, the red player will get 2 favor tokens. Now, let's say on a future turn you go here on the east. Well, then green, yellow, and blue will each get 1 promoter or 1 lobbyist. Now, I did mention these tracks earlier, and I just wanted to show them to you. These are the 6 tracks in the game. These affect the industry cards and where you buy them. So if you look at this industry card here, you'll notice that here's the cost as well. If you are the highest player along this track, so if you look here, maybe green is up here, well then yellow, red, and blue players, every time they build that, they would have to pay the green player for this one. And if the green player needs to build an industry card that uses this particular resource, well then they don't have to pay anything at all. In addition to that, when you move up along these tracks, you're going to get bonuses as well. The red here has a variety of different bonuses. This one's mostly influence points. These are cards that you could use. This is money. These are the promoters or the lobbyists that you use. The blue track is really interesting because as you advance on here, the amount of money that you get for a loan increases. And in addition to that, at the end of the game, your asset value will increase as well. So there's a lot of going on here along the tracks. There are some end game bonuses that you get for more favor, like certain tracks will be worth more at the end of the game, but only for favor, not for influence and not for asset, but for favor. So this is something you have to also think about as you play with this puzzle. Whew, all right, so just a quick reminder that this is a prototype. Once a campaign gets launches and fulfills, they will use a different manufacturer for the prototype than with the final game. So what you see here is not what you're going to get. You might not have like these little puzzle boards, like these pieces here like fit into a puzzle. They might be foldable things such as that. So I don't know. The arts and the components are not finalized. I believe it's still going to be wood, but this is about like 80 to 90% of what you'll see. So just keep that in mind as we talk. Components. Now, for the components, I really shouldn't be talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it because these little action tokens that you put on the board, like I just don't like. I don't like them. You use them quite a lot, so I would prefer like a nice wooden cubes. What's wrong with wooden cubes? I think wooden cubes would be a little bit easier to control and to move around. Very easy to see. Another one are these little like lobbyists or the promoter tokens. I don't know, just like the big circle and the small circle, it just doesn't really do it for me. I would like something a little bit nicer than this. Also, the money, I give or take about the money. Like the money comes in these nice little rectangles, and they come in this nice little bag that I have in the box. But I don't really use these. I just use poker chips, and I think poker chips are fine. I think most people have poker chips by now. But if not, you have these. It does feel a little weird because you're playing with these rectangles, but it does feel unique in that way. Last but not least on the components is that the boards, you may not have noticed this, but the boards are not foldable boards. They are these little puzzle pieces here. Now, It doesn't bother me at all. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's just not something that I like. I just like things that fold as opposed to puzzles. What's really cool though is that this board is modular, because this game's a beast. It's huge, table hog. So especially when you have 4 players, and having a board that's modular at least helps you move things around. Now, again, this is not finalized because this could all change because they're going through a different manufacturer, and who knows what you're gonna get. Overall, art-wise, I feel that the art is okay. It's really, really nice. The iconography, things are really clear. The one thing I don't like, though, is that for the industry cards here, a lot of the art is just snapshots of the real world. Like, I mean, maybe they got everything from, like, Unsplash. I don't know. But, like, I kind of wish that it had some sort of arts. Now, there aren't that many cards, so it's not too much, but I kind of wish they push that forward a little bit more instead of just photography. I would have really rather preferred an art style, especially one that's very similar to the board. UI. Biggest beef that I have with this game is actually the UI. Now, just hold on there. Give me a second to explain. The problem is that the game is huge. It's really, really, really big. And when there's an auction game happening and you're auctioning for like 2 of these cards that are tiny, like everyone needs to be able to see and read those cards. So you need to be able to see what you're bidding on. And sometimes the information on here is a little small. You do get better at it, but if you need glasses when you're playing, or your eyes are just hard to see, like that could be problematic for you. And I kind of wish that the design or the UI of the card was a little bit better as well. In addition to that, the industry cards here, the UI just doesn't do it for me. The scoring cards here for the planning commission, like I think that these could be better done. I think the artwork is okay, but it's really hard to see from a distance, and you kind of need to be close to read it and to be reminded about it. And I just kind of wish that something was very big, visual, and clear. Gameplay. Now, this is a tricky teach, and it's a tricky teach because of the ending. As I said before, I find that the most interesting part of the game is the end game scoring. You have like the influence track, and then you have the asset track, and I find that really interesting, but you need to really begin with that when you teach the game, so everything is in context of that final scoring, and it can be a little bit of a tricky teach. And that final scoring is really, really interesting. Normally, when you think about games like this, you think, oh, okay, there's influence and there's assets. I just do a little bit of both, and that's fine. Wrong. Not in this game. Because if you do a little bit of both, chances are you'll lose both, and then you won't be in contention for the final scoring. You need to really focus on influence or really focus on assets. And you got to make sure that you win at least one. Because if there's a tie for like most influence or most asset, the tiebreaker between those 2 players are the favor tokens. So either you're going influence and favor, or you're going assets and favor. And that creates a really interesting dynamic to the game. But that being said, when I was teaching you how to play, I mentioned that these industry cards are the main beef of the game. Like, you need to get industry cards. Like when I've taught the game, the most successful tip that I have for new players is buy and build as many industry cards as you possibly can. You'll get asset value and you'll get revenue, and that should help you deal with the game. Just period. So even though you have like these 2 styles of heavy influence or heavy asset, you're still fighting for the same thing. You're still fighting for industry cards. So it could feel, I guess, a little bit misguided to say that there are 2 big strategies in this game. But there are layers to this game. A lot of layers to this game. In addition to like the influence or assets, there's the idea of giving money to other opponents. So like if you notice that one person's behind and you need this person to be more of a threat, so that way other players are preoccupied by them, then you buy one of their shares, giving them a flush of cash, and then now they're able to be a little bit more threatening on the board. In addition to that, like you want to really push up on these tracks, and therefore it makes it very difficult to build, or not that difficult, but pretty expensive. Now, if you're the boss, if you're leading this track, and people are giving you money, that's a great benefit for you. And by pushing farther along that track, you're making it more and more and more expensive. So all of a sudden, like having someone pay you like $3 becomes having them pay you like $15, and that's can be that's a good chunk in this game, and it can definitely hinder your plans for each round. I really like the spatial element of this game, of the houses, because the houses can either be like on the tracks or about how far you're away from certain key cities. And if you're filling up the area next to that key city, then you gotta have to buy like a factory like in a really far away from one of the key cities, and that makes it very expensive. So it creates this nice economy where you're giving each other money and helping each other out, but at the same time you're still competing, and I find that really interesting. Now, this is a bidding game, so if you're not like bidding, then this game is clearly not for you, because you're bidding for the policy cards, you're bidding for the industry cards, which is the main engine of your engine. Now, the cool thing about this game, though, is that even if you lose the bid, you still get something. You're still getting promoters, or I like to think, I call them lobbyists because it's a little bit easier. You get them on the board, giving you more potential for strategy actions. And I think that is really cool. So even though you don't come ahead one place, you're coming up ahead somewhere else. And then you're gaining more lobbyists and more political power. So therefore, you're able to swing things a little bit more in your favor. I also like the fact that even though you lose the industry card, like in the bid, you can just buy one outright at, granted, twice the price, but you're able to buy one still. Now, let's talk about the strategy actions, because I find the strategy actions to be really compelling in this game. You're using your shares to put them on here. So if you want people to buy your shares, you're dropping shares directly into the strategy action and using them up, so that way your share cost goes up, and that way when someone buys your share, you're getting even more money. And the strategy action is a nice way to kind of counteract the bidding. Like, you're not doing great with the bids, well then you have these really strong for strategy actions, and maybe you go up twice on a track. Maybe you just get influence straight up. Maybe you get an extra house onto the map. I really like that flexibility that the strategy action offers to the regular like action selection that happens at the top of the board. Now, that being said, this game is really tight, because essentially you only have 14 actions. And granted, you can buy more actions, true, but you're really just delaying an action because it costs an action to buy an action, and therefore you're still stuck at 14 actions. So you want to win the industry cards and come in first place, because then you'll be the Tycoon for the next round, and that gives you one more free action. So you can have anywhere from 14 to 21 actions, and probably somewhere in between there, and you really need to make the most of it, and it's really tight. In addition to that, there's also these headline cards. Now, I played these with a few games, and I actually quite like them. There's a little event that happens at the beginning of each round, and they're mostly all like pretty beneficial. Like, some of them are a little bit detrimental, like all the shareholders have to pay out this round, or each player pays $5 per industry that they've built. So those are a little bit negative, but some of them give a lot of bonus, like players get extra money, all players gain, just move up on the track just once, just for free. Money cost for build action is double this round. So it can fluctuate from up and down, from like good or bad, but it's affecting everybody. Solo gameplay. Now, I didn't mention this in the how to play, and I do want to mention now and give it its own section, but the solo for bots for this game is super smooth. It reminds me a lot of like David Turczi games, where it's just take cards. Take a card, flip it, do what it says. And it's pretty simple, but this has a little bit more layers to it. Maybe you can't see it because of the deck, but I just use like land cards for magic and sleeve them because it's just a little bit easier. There are 3 land tiles. You have like fire, water, and plains, and that's because there are 3 difficulties of these cards, and you can kind of customize your bot. You can make it super easy, super medium, a little bit of easy, a little bit of medium, a little bit of hard. You can make it ultra hard, in which case it'll just obliterate you completely. And what's even cooler than that is that there are enough cards here that you could have 2 different AI decks. Like you could play a solo game with 2 different opponents, and one could be like super easy, and one could be like kind of medium. And you can customize each of those decks and do that. Or if not, you can just have the same deck for both the players or all 3 players. I found that the solo deck to be really easy to handle. The biggest problem that I had with the solo variant is the rules, and everything you need to know about the game is in the rules. And I think the rules are pretty good overall. The only problem I have is that for the solo variant, the rules aren't written in a way that I liked. And For me, I just kind of want them to teach the game again. I don't want to be like, oh, solo, well, here's everything that's different. How about you? I'm like, no, setup, this is what you do differently, this is how you do it. This phase, this is what you do, this phase, this is what you do, this phase, what you do. I kind of want to be handheld a little bit more, and I kind of wish that they did that with the rulebook. But again, hey, who knows? They might edit that rulebook out. But I think the solo game is really, really cool, and it definitely feels like you're playing against a semi-intelligent player. Like, this makes some pretty powerful turns. I don't know how I would say clever, but each of the actions are definitely very powerful, and you can definitely feel these power turns. Overall, I give this game a 9. That's right, a 9. Now, if you want to see how I rate all my games, you can go to BGG and check out my username is like Evil Panda, I believe. And you just go there and I rate all my games. Games only from Asia. So you can see in the back here that I have some games like from the West, like Cyclades, Mind Management is here, like Frosthaven. But I don't rate them on BGG. I only rate games from Asia, games that I would consider reviewing on my channel. I give this one a 9. I guess technically it's about an 8.5, but I don't give decimals just because I think, like, you know, you could sit on the fence between 8 and 9, and you decide, is it going to be an 8 or a 9? Just make that choice. Make that choice. For me, an 8 is a game that I would willingly suggest to players. Be like, hey, let's play this game. Oh, you want to play this style of game? Let's play this game. I think it's really good. I recommend it. A 9 is a game that I actively seek people to play. So right now, this game is a 9 for me because I want to play this more and explore this space more and explore the difference between like influence and assets, and I really want to explore more about what this game has to offer. So right from now, for me, it's about a 9. I could see this after a few plays, it can go down to an 8. Well, one player on BGG said like he thought this was better than Brass Birmingham. And while I don't think it's better than Brass Birmingham, I do think it's actually really, really good. I think Brass Birmingham wins out in the competition of this just because it's just so smooth. Brass Birmingham is very, very smooth. It's a little fiddly with a few rules here and there. This doesn't feel that smooth because of the UI of the cards. Like, the cards are kind of hard to read, and when you have auctions, I think it's just, you need the game board to be really readable from a distance for auctions, in my opinion, to work the best. And I think this game needs a little bit of love and a little bit of help and development to get there. But I definitely think it's worth that because it could definitely be much more. Overall, this game is really, really impressive. I was very impressed. There aren't many heavy games from Asia. Now, I always go on to say that like Asian board games are not a monolith. There's a lot of variety in there. But on the whole, yeah, games tend to be a little bit lighter, not that heavy. And this is not only one of the heaviest games that I played that have come from Asia, but definitely one of the best heavy games that I played coming from Asia. By far one of the best of the heavier games. And I rated it a 9. But I did promise you, like, what does this game mean to me? And what is it I think it's going to mean for the industry as a whole? And for that, we got to come to the corner. For a long time, I struggled with my racial identity. And the best way I can describe it is that there is an old video called The Lost Interview with Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee is in Hong Kong, and he's talking to this guy. And he says to him, you know, when I was in America, I was too Asian for the Americans. But when I moved back to Hong Kong, I was too American for the Hong Kongese. And I felt that there was no home for me. And to elaborate on that, I feel that really resonated with me. Like, over like 60 years ago, he said this, and it resonated with me today. And eventually, over my time living here in Taiwan, I felt the exact same way. I'm too American for Taiwanese, and in America, I felt I was too Asian for America. And now I feel that I'm a culture of one. That there are things that I love and dislike about American culture, and the things that I love and really dislike about Taiwanese culture, and I find that somewhere in between, I'm there. That's where I feel comfortable. And I've talked at length about this with other minorities, with other people of color, and all that, we kind of resonate there with that. Like, it takes time to be comfortable with that. And part of my mission for like Cardboard East is to celebrate games from Asia because, you know, different cultures tell different stories. And I think that these are differences that we can use to harm each other, to make prejudice against each other, or to celebrate those differences and be inclusive of everyone and all these thoughts. Because when you see the world through a different lens, it can be completely life-changing. Learning Chinese has been one of the biggest changes in my life, because I was able to experience the world through a different language and a different culture, and it changed the way that I see the world and fundamentally people and myself. So I'm like you, like I'm from North America, and I played a lot of games about like trade in the Mediterranean and like medieval Europe. And there's nothing wrong with those games. I think Trois and Concordia are some of my favorite games of all time. But I kind of want to see games from different cultures and different stories. And Tycoon India 1981 tells the story of the rebirth of a nation. British colonization of India was absolutely brutal, and I can't stress how brutal it really was. It ended in 1947. One modern day economist, Indian economist, he estimates that the British Empire took $45 trillion of today's money out of India, because they were just really, really cruel at what they did. And politicians of that day even bragged about how good of a job they did of taking everything out. The jewel of the empire, right, was stolen. And this is a story about India kind of becoming free and trying to rebuild the country. And it's all completely abstracted. Yeah, I granted you. And you could argue that, well, Britain made all this infrastructure in the city, but they built infrastructure not for the people, not for them to commute from point A to point B, but for goods to go from where they're being manufactured and gathered to trains to boats back to Britain. And this is a game that kind of talks about how to rebuild a country from that. And I love that all the policy cards have like this text about what this act was, how it impacted India, and why it was important. And that adds a lot of flavor and historical texture to the game that I really, really appreciated. Now, this game, Tycoon India 1981, was designed by Siddhant Chand. And I apologize if I said your name wrong, bro. I'm trying. But I've only played 3 of his games, but each 3 of his games were good. Were actually really good. Like Chai Garam, I made a previous video, you can check that out up here, was actually really, really solid. It had a Kickstarter campaign recently. This one is with a different publisher, it was Zen Wood, and I'm really impressed with this game. And what does this mean for the industry? Well, I'll tell you. Which country has the highest population in the world? And you're going to say China, right? Because that's what I heard for most of my life. Well, that all changed somewhere maybe this summer. And now, granted, I know that we never really know how many people are on the planet because it's really hard to do a population census. But the UN, and Al Jazeera reported that the UN said that now India has about 2.9 million more people than China. That just blows my mind. 8 billion people in the world, 3 billion of them are Indian or Chinese. Wow. Now, on top of that, India is still a very nascent market in terms of gaming. But there are tons of people in India, and there are more and more gamers in India every single year. Now, Siddhant Chand only designed maybe a handful of games, I think 4 or 5. And this game, to come out so early in a nascent market, I think that we're going to see some really impressive games from India in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, Love Letter came out in 2012. And ever since Love Letter came out, Western publishers have been going to Japan looking for the next Love Letter that's going to skyrocket their company to an international juggernaut. So where's the Love Letter? Where's the Brass Birmingham that's going to come out of India? I don't think this is as good as Brass Birmingham, but I do think it comes really close. And I think that we'll see a Brass Birmingham Love Letter game from India really soon, sooner than you think. And I really find that really fascinating to see games that are coming out of India. I've been invited to go to MeepleCon in India, and I really, really want to check out a board game convention in India with tons of people there, tons of gamers. I feel really excited about this. And if you find board games from Asia as interesting as I do, you definitely want to check out my next video. See you there.